Let's decompress or reinflate this IP version 6 address, however you want to look at it. And you can see we've got 2222 for the first block, then 23, then A for the third block, then a set of colons, then two full blocks, and then a block 342 for our last block. Don't go too fast through this, but if you use this structured approach, you'll nail this every single time. First, insert zeros at the beginning of each block that has at least one value in it but fewer than 4. And what you're doing there is replacing the zeros that were removed by leading zero compression. As a result of that, we have an almost reinflated IP version 6 address. But then we've got the two colons there in the middle, and we know that's zero compression. And the question is, how many fields of zeros are represented by zero compression in this address? Well, we know this. All you got to do is count the blocks you see now and subtract it from 8, because we know we always have to end up with 8 blocks with a full IP version 6 address. And the deal is you put 2 blocks there in the middle, just like you see, and you are done. Just a word here too, this is an easy skill to practice whenever you have a few minutes to waste, burn, however you want to put it. And you don't need a practice exam to do so. Practice exams are fine, but you don't even have to have it. If you've got 5 or 10 minutes at work or at home, and you're just gonna kind of breeze through a couple of websites or whatever like that, just instead of doing that, grab a piece of paper, write out some version 6 addresses without really thinking about what you're putting in there, and then just say, okay, how would I compress this? Or you can write a compressed one and say, how would I decompress this? It just takes a few minutes, and those few minutes here and there really add up on exam day. Now, let's talk a little bit about how those addresses get assigned, and your first address type, the global routing prefix. Now, of course, we know the address formats of version 4 and version 6 are wildly different, but the purpose of a lot of the addresses and the other services we look at in this section of the course are going to seem very familiar to you. There are very few things in version 6 that are just absolutely totally brand new from version 4, especially with the fundamentals. One of those differences, though, is that version 6 addresses have a huge advantage when it comes to ease of subnetting and summarization. And even when you're really, really good at summarizing and subnetting with version 4, it can seem a little clumsy at times. And especially if you've been working with version 6. Because when the version 4 address scheme was developed, subnetting and summarization were not priorities. But they were when version 6 was developed. It was actually designed with ease of subnetting and summarization in mind. They were created. They were born to be subnetted and summarized. The reason I mention that is that the original name of the first address we're looking at is the aggregatable global unicast address. If that's not an intimidating name, I don't know what is. Aggregation, by the way, is just a fancy way of saying summarization. We aggregate routes in BGP, and it really is just summarizing them. Now, that first word's really been pretty much dropped. You don't see this full term anymore. But the global unicast addresses that we're going to see in our labs, they were designed for easier summarization and subnetting. And here's how part of that comes into play is the way the addresses actually get to us. Because when your company gets a block of version 6 addresses from an ISP, it's already been subnetted a little bit, because at the top of what I call the IP version 6 address subnet food chain is the IANA, the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. And the IANA, they're at the top. They have the largest blocks of addresses. They have the whole pie, if you will, and they assign subnets from those blocks to what we call regional internet registries, RIRs, in accordance with very strict rules. Their assignments of the addresses and where they go and how they're assigned actually have subnetting and summarization in mind. In turn, what happens then is that the registries assign subnets of their address blocks, the ones they got from the IANA, they assign subnets of those blocks to the ISPs. The IANA never assigns addresses directly to the ISPs. The registries have to be involved. The ISPs then take those address blocks and they subnet those, and finally those subnets go to their customers. And you can see on the board, it really is like a pie. The IANA has the entire version 6 address pie, and they slice it into blocks. And the block of addresses goes to an RIR who subnets those blocks and assigns them to the ISPs. And the slice of pie keeps getting smaller, our subnet slices, if you will. But the ISPs subnet the block of addresses they get from the RIR and assign them to companies like yours and mine. I do recommend you go out to IANA.org/numbers for more info on the process. And it's not required for the CCENT or CCNA exam, but it's cool stuff to see where the registries are, charts that show how the IANA keeps highly detailed information on where the addresses go. It's highly organized. And actually, just quickly show you the website here. This is IANA.org. And if you go with /numbers here, you'll actually see how they mention when version 4 and version 6 were deployed actually, and they even show you the registries here. So it's pretty cool stuff. Like I said, just go ahead and have a look around. Nothing here you need to study for the exam, but we always go above and beyond around here. It's good stuff to know. Now here's the odd part. These blocks of addresses are actually referred to as global routing prefixes. And when you think of a prefix at this point, you likely think of, say, prefix notation, something like that. It's just one of those IPv6 things we have to get used to. We do have a couple of those. And again, that block of addresses is called the global routing prefix. So you and I, as the network admins, we've requested a block of addresses from the ISP, a global routing prefix, if you will, and we got it. So, now what do? We subnet it. And it's really not that bad. Personally, once you get practicing with both skills, I think you'll find version 6 subnetting to be easier than version 4. Now, when we get the global routing prefix from our ISP, that comes with a prefix length as well. And in this example, we're going to use a /48 prefix length. This is a very common length. The prefix length in version 6, again, it's similar to the network mask in version 4. And it's so common, the /48, that sometimes we just leave the slash out. They're called 48s. Now, you might think we got 128 bits, and here we got a 48-bit prefix, so that's a lot of bits left over for subnetting. But there's also an interface identifier to work with. And we are going to go over those when we're actually doing some labs here soon, and you'll see them come into play. But the interface identifier is found at the end of an IP version 6 address, and it actually identifies the host. It is almost always 64 bits in length because that just makes life easier for everybody with subnetting. And we're going to go with that length in this particular exercise. So if we have 48 bits in our prefix and we have a 64-bit interface identifier, how many bits does that leave us? It leaves us 16 for subnetting, because we're assuming a global routing prefix of 2001.1111.2222. We know we've got an interface ID. It's a 64-bit value that concludes the address, and that leaves a 16-bit subnet field or subnet ID right in the middle, found right after the GRP. Now, we were told one of the many things we're promised with version 6 is we're going to have as many subnets as we could ever want. And you think, well, is that really possible with just 16 bits? But we use the same formula for calculating the number of valid subnets we would have. It's 2 to the nth power, with n being the number of subnet bits. And 2 to the 16th power is 65,536. That ought to cover us for a while. I think that's enough subnets for our company. But now we need to come up with the subnet IDs themselves, and this is easy as well. There's really nothing to it. In our example of 2001.1111.2222 as the global routing prefix, we know the very next block is going to represent the subnets. Then you can start writing them out and just go from there. That's what I would do. Now, what you really want to do, of course, in the real world is put them in a spreadsheet and say, I put this subnet on this point-to-point link at this point in the network. And, don't get cute and don't skip around. Don't go 0001 to 000 or 0014, that kind of thing. Don't skip around. Just do it sequentially. It makes your life easier, believe me. Just a quick, gentle reminder as well, the first subnet after 0009 here would be 000A, because we're working with hex here. Well, that's the worst Dustin Hoffman I've ever heard. I got to do it louder than that to do it right, but we are working with hex here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get to some labs here. We're going to start assigning some IP version 6 addresses to router interfaces. Now we've got options there. It won't surprise you to find out. We can do so statically, and we're going to start with that. We're going to do some static assignments. We can also use services that are going to remind us greatly of DHCP, and we're going to see all of these options in this course, because there is a version of DHCP with IP version 6, a couple of them actually, and we can use these to assign address to hosts, or, believe it or not, have hosts come up with their own addresses. That's pretty cool. But first, we have to make sure that IP version 6 support is on to begin with, and we have to do that twice. We got to make sure it's on 2 different ways, and you'll see those ways at the beginning of the very next video. See you there.